Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the DADPOCALYPSE Now show. I'm your host, Jason Gowan. With me tonight is my unofficial yet kind of official co-host, Mr. Jamie Kaler.
Hey!
Hey, buddy, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I am trying to survive my children per usual.
Honestly, and it's funny that you say my unofficial co-host. I basically was like, hey, listen, man, can I have an excuse to say I have to go do something for an hour? And then I told my wife, I was like, listen, Jason, he's begged me. They've asked me repeatedly to come do. And she's like, oh, okay. So she's bathing the kids right now. I'm like, see you later.
Oh, so you totally got out of it.
Yeah, I snuck out. Yeah.
Nice. Well, let's get right into it. Our guest tonight is a good friend of mine. We've been knowing each other a long time. He is the host of PBS's New England Legends. He has authored a lot of books about the paranormal, but tonight he's coming here to talk about his new book, The Call of Kilimanjaro, Finding Hope Above the Clouds. It is a fantastic read, and I can't wait to talk to him about it. Ladies and gentlemen, my good buddy, Mr. Jeff Belanger.
Hey,
man, how are you?
I'm sitting on a rainbow, hanging in there like a hair in a biscuit. How about you guys?
I love it.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Jamie, Jeff, Jamie.
Hey, nice to officially meet you. Yeah, I'm a big
Nice
fan.
to meet you.
The Kilimanjaro stuff's crazy.
Yeah,
I love your backdrop there. Are you at the movies?
Yeah, this is my basement. This is the man cave.
That's
So,
amazing.
Yeah. No, it's when you're a dad, you need these things. You need this. Yeah. Look at that.
Because Jamie, we joke about, has his communist manifesto, like his Unabomber stuff behind
It's
him.
not communist. It's an anti-technology manifesto. No,
Good.
my anti-technology manifesto. And
I
those are all the
gotta
snacks for my
fix my
kids.
Ninja Turtle.
Those are all the Costco boxes of snacks that I just throw in the morning for lunch.
Yeah, and you feel like a gourmet.
Yeah.
So you're also a
Pirates
lunch lady now, right?
Say it again,
Anyway,
Jason.
I was saying, Jeff, or that Jamie's also now a lunch lady.
Oh, I'm the lunch. I do lunch every day. I'm the guy. And do you do a love note, Jamie? Do you put a note in the lunchbox?
Occasionally, but so we only started school. This was the first week they even went back. But I have been homeschooling for a year, and so every morning I would print out their schedule and I gave them little fake names every day. Because one's her middle name's Elizabeth and the other one's middle name's Margaret. So it was Queen Elizabeth and Princess Margaret for a week. And so, yeah, but I'm going to start the little notes in the lunch. What exactly do you write, Jeff?
So some days they're funny, some days I'll throw in a dad joke. Some days they're motivational. Like, if I feel like my daughter's feeling down or whatever. And some days they're just sort of stupid. Like I'll just draw like a musical note and I'll be like, this is your love note. Like it's a note and just, but I've been doing, we haven't missed, man. We're talking every day she's 14. So 8th grade. This has been a long commitment. In fact, I think you can count on one hand how many times we forgot the love note because she tells us, she comes home. She's like, there was no note. And you're just like, oh, I'm the worst person on earth. I forgot the love note in your lunch.
That's awesome, man. That's I think stuff like that's fantastic. I do. I think it's gold.
Yeah. Well,
I just write bills to my kids, the invoices for things that they've either broken here or destroyed. Like I just write invoices. And one of my sons, we're actually going to shut off his services as a child soon because he's not paying.
That's fair. Tough, but fair. How are they going to learn?
Exactly. Because if they don't learn it about bill collectors now from us, they'll learn it in the cold, hard world out there.
That makes total sense, Jason. I think you're well on your way to dad of the week.
Listen,
maybe of the fortnight. Maybe dad of the fortnight.
So Jeff, I got to be honest. Until I read your book, and I've known you a while, like 2001-ish. I think we first communicated through the paranormal. And I had zero idea you have a daughter. Like, how did I guess mostly it's paranormal conventions and it's, lectures and then parties, and it never came up, but I had no idea and I feel terrible.
So I think this just is a testament to how good of a dad I am that I've managed to keep her away from you and a secret from you. Like, that's just another feather in my cap. Like,
Me,
Dad of the month.
Dave Schrader's the one with like 84 kids.
Yeah. He's like on a mission to you know what it is? It's that stimulus money. Who's laughing now? Right? $1,400 a kid. That dude's rich.
Yeah.
He's rich. Like
he's trying to breed out the entire state. He's just going to take over. He'll just be the king of Minnesota.
He's like a voting block now. Like governors, people running for governor in Minnesota have to court the Schrader clan, right? Because they all vote. So
they're going to gerrymander and split the House up so they can split up the voting for.
Yeah. No, so he's just smart. Now it's paying off because of all these child credits and tax refunds and all that other stuff. No, I've just got the one. 14 years. She's 14 in 8th grade, and it's funny how it changed my career having a kid. Right. So when I first started as a book author and stuff like that, man, it's a hustle. You know, like you're trying to like get gigs, you're trying to like get paid lectures, you're trying to find the next writing gig or whatever. And I was doing interviews. Remember Blog Talk Radio?
Blog Talk Radio? Absolutely. That was like if you were nobody in the paranormal unless you were on Blog Talk Radio.
Dude, so what's funny is like, come on, they said we have over 1 million listeners. I'm like, you have 1 million shows with 1 listener each, right? Because I was on some of those shows, and I'm like, you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and you're like, was this worth it? And like, then you have a kid and you're like, wait, spending time with her has super big value now. And so it made me get a lot more picky about how I use my time. And so if someone's like, all right, hey, we want you to come on, you know, you do stuff for your friends, for favors or whatever, but man, I got a lot more focused on work, on how do I make this thing provide for her? Right. You know, like how do I make smarter decisions and stuff like that? And it got me focused on my career in a way that I never would have guessed having a kid could do.
Yeah.
Definitely motivates you. You definitely use your time more efficiently. Where I used to sit and write and I go, well, I have 12 hours to write, and I wouldn't get anything written. Now I have literally in the day, I have 32 minutes, and I'll get more done in that 32 minutes than I would have in the whole 12-hour day. But I will tell you though, when I was single, I had a rent controlled apartment at a bank full of money, I was more picky about like any of those gigs. I was like, I'm not going to do that. I couldn't care less. And now that I have kids, as an actor or a writer or blog talk, you never know which one's going to be the one that kind of pays off. So now you're like, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, that sounds sure. Oh, yeah, I'm in. That sounds great.
So you know what's bad though is you find yourself like when someone asks you to do a thing, you're like, I feel horrible, but I'm like, how many Twitter followers do you have? How many Facebook followers do you have? How much whatever? Like, what's the currency, right? And because like time is the only, like I pay the bills with my time. It's the only thing I have to sell. I have nothing else. And so you try to get so laser focused and knowing when you're self-employed, and I've been self-employed since 2004. And so like I know the value of my time, like to the dollar. And so, you know, like you just get so caught up with it. And it's such a, man, it's such a treadmill, right? Like when you're self-employed, you don't want to say no to anybody. You want to just get the next gig, the next gig, the next gig. And life becomes this treadmill. And I realized like, hey, I mean, I'm not, it sounds like I'm complaining. I know I've got a pretty amazing career in life. I get to make a living, like looking for weird stuff and stories all over the world, and people pay me for that. It's incredible, but it's still like a rut, right? It's still a rut of my own design, but it's a rut. It's this thing that I'm in and I do day in and day out. So how do you shake it up?
Well,
it's got a positive and a negative, because it's like, I'm the same as an actor. I'm self-employed. So when I'm working, it's great, but you're always like, well, look, if I don't want to work, I can go do whatever I want. But when you have kids, all of a sudden, then you're just trying to keep the gigs coming and coming and coming. And all of a sudden, you know, you're freelance, and you know, you talk to the guy who's got the steady paycheck coming in, and you're like, yeah, it's tricky.
But I feel horrible for my friends that have one job. On the one hand, their tax returns must be like heaven, right? Where you're like, one job, one thing, you do that easy form. Like my tax return's like this thick. And so, but if you lose that one job, you lost all your money. Like I've got 20 jobs. If I lost one, I got 19 others. I just got to replace that one. And so, and that sort of gives me comfort. But as you guys know, that means you're working weekends, you're working holidays, you know, you do stuff at night, you do it early in the morning. What time zone are you in? London? Okay. You know, like you're just doing stuff. But at the same time, like, I feel like if you have a story to tell and it's something that resonates with you, you're kind of psyched to do it. And right. I mean, I know, like Jason and I were joking before about like how it's cool to talk about stuff that's non-paranormal. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how much I got left in the tank that hasn't been said on paranormal, right?
Right.
But like being a dad, being a guy in his midlife somewhere and like having an adventure, that's more exciting for me to talk to right now where I'm at in my life.
Yeah. So, and you and I know each other through the paranormal. I mean, that's kind of, that's where we got our friendship start.
Yeah.
And, I'm a big fan of your books. I have a bunch of them. I'm in one of them. So
full frontal too. Full frontal. You see it all. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a full like Seinfeld Jason Alexander on the couch, just topless pose. And it's a gross thing, but Jeff posted it anyway. Anyway, so because of the paranormal, like I didn't know you had this daughter, and then I read your book. So take us through the book. It's I gotta tell you, I have twins and a 5-year-old, and they consume every second of every day, and they. This is the book, The Call of Kilimanjaro, Finding Hope Above the Clouds. And I haven't read a book since they were born. I haven't touched a book. I don't have, if it's not the monster at the end of this book, something, the ones by Dr. Seuss that weren't canceled, or something, with Winnie the Pooh in them, I don't get to read books. Yeah. And so, I was, kind of started to prep for this interview. And I was like, I'll try and get through as much of it as I can. And I couldn't put it down. And I finished it in 2 days. Like I was just like, and that's in between doing all my dad stuff. Like it truly was inspirational and exactly what I needed to hear in where I'm at right now. Can you kind of take us through the book?
Should I just read it?
Yeah, just start at the beginning.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, let's stop the sales here. Like
I like books on tape anyway, so I'm all
perfect.
for it.
I guess to say it better, take us through the process of getting there.
Okay, the story. The funny thing is, I don't know where the story starts, because where does any story start, right? We're on the mountain, and I'm 50 yards up this trail. Kilimanjaro, it's 19,341 feet tall. It's the tallest mountain in Africa. It's one of the 7 summits. And I'm 50 yards up the trail, and I realized, like, wait, I meant to take a picture of the first step because it was going to be this big moment, right? Mm-hmm. And we're already on the way, and I'm so disjointed. There's obviously no cell signal, no Wi-Fi. We're in Eastern Africa, just south of the equator, on the border of Tanzania and Kenya, and I'm just completely scattered. This trip's expensive. It's money and time away from my family, away from my job. It feels sort of selfish. And then you wonder, like, what's the first step? Was the first step maybe not 50 yards ago, but that morning in Moshi, Tanzania, when we left the hotel? Or maybe it was 3 days ago in Boston Logan Airport when we flew over to get here. Or maybe it was when I started hiking after college. Or maybe when I took 2 semesters of Swahili in college, which seems so random at the time. But I failed French 1. And I barely passed Spanish 2. And then I ended up taking Swahili. And then I thought about this Toto song, Africa, when I was a kid, and I'm like, this mountain has been sort of in my head for most of my life. But the wake up call happened in 2013. My brother-in-law, Chris, just a couple years older than I, it's funny. He's a funny guy. There he is. We support different football teams, as you can see. Yeah. Yet there's still peace between us. He was like one of those guys that always hid behind laughter. Those guys, fun, smart, but like you put up a wall of laughter to sort of hide behind it. And I always thought, we'll get closer later. There's plenty of time. But he was always great fun at family gatherings and holidays and stuff. But it's October of 2013, and he's losing weight, and he's having some weird stomach issues, and he goes to his doctor, and they run tests and more tests. And his doctor calls him and says, hey, look, just whatever you're doing, get down here right now. Don't make an appointment. Don't wait for your workday to end. Leave this minute and come to see me. And he knows doctors don't do that. Like that's right. Something's not good. And when he gets there, the doctor tells him, you've got cancer. It's fully metastasized, stage 4. It's everywhere. And you've got 18 to 24 months to live. And Not a clue, right? Just went from losing some weight. It was colon cancer, which is slow moving. It's not supposed to metastasize fast in your low 40s. That shouldn't be something people are even looking for yet. And suddenly it's a death sentence.
Is that how old he was? Because I wasn't sure.
He was 44 when he got the prognosis. And so so he goes through the chemo and the radiation, and my sister sort of went into denial at that point. And he knows I'm a paranormal guy, right? And he calls me and he goes, "Look, man, you're into some weird stuff." And I said, "Yeah, that's fair. That's totally true." He said, "I'm going through something pretty weird." And I said, "Yeah, you are." I mean, think about death, right? For most people, death is supposed to be, you're not supposed to get the chance to say goodbye. That's not natural. Natural is you don't wake up. You have a heart attack. You get in a car accident. You're breathing 1 minute and you're dead the next. That's natural. Having a 2 years to face down this thing, 2 years is funny, right? Because it's a long time and not a long time simultaneously. It exists in equal states. It's Schrodinger's 2 years, right? Like, so
Schrodinger's calendar, right? It's these 2 years. And as the time goes, he and I get closer because we're talking about these big things that he just can't talk about with my sister because she's just checked out on the thing. She's, and then as he starts to really decline, he's having these out of body experiences near the end, and he's only talking to me about them. And he said, "I feel like there's something inside this broken machine that's practicing and getting ready to come out and stay out." And he wanted to tell me because he wanted me to tell my sister. And he said, "I want you to tell others. Like, I really feel this thing is happening." And so, so we lost him. We lost him in December of 2013. And that was hard. Like, that was really hard. And I remember we had a 3-hour conversation the week before, and it's so strange to have a conversation with someone that this is goodbye. This is exactly what this is. And I didn't say it when I hugged him for that last time. I didn't have to, and I didn't want to, and I don't regret not saying goodbye. It was just, "Hey, thanks." And I'm here, and I don't even know what I said, but it was not goodbye. So you said it, but you said it without saying it.
Yeah. And by the end of his life, I mean, how fortunate for him and the people in his life that he sort of got to attend his own funeral. Like, people came through, and at that point he was just this enlightened being, right? He was even golden in color because his organs are failing and he's completely jaundiced, but like the sun was coming in through the window and hitting his skin, and he just glowed golden, which is not the normal color of any human being I know, but like he just looked like this Buddha, like enlightened Buddha, and just nothing but love and compassion for everyone who came through. No hard feelings, no nothing. And I mean, we can only hope we all get to that point. So after we lost him, it was just 7 months later, and I was at a paranormal event where we were raising money for this historic preservation. And my friend Amy from the Leukemia Lymphoma Society said, "Hey, Jeff, we got a new fundraiser coming up." And I said, "Oh, Amy, I'm so busy. I got so much going on." We did this Light the Night walk a couple of years earlier. We raised like $1,000 for them through social media. Very generous. But we just walked carrying a balloon with a glow stick in it through downtown Worcester, Massachusetts for 2 miles. And the miracle was no one had to stop to pee. Like, that was the great, that was amazing. And she's like, I said, "Oh, Amy, there's a lot going on." She's like, "We're going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro." And I froze. And Amy doesn't know I took Swahili in college. She doesn't know about Africa as a kid, Toto. She doesn't know that I'm a hiker and I've always wanted to do it. And she doesn't know that I just lost my brother-in-law to cancer just months earlier. And I was like, raise money for cancer, cross this item off my bucket list. I'm almost the same age my brother-in-law is when he died and won't get to do any of his dreams that were still out there. And I looked at her and I just went, I'm in. Like, let's do this. And so that's how that was a moment, right? And from there, we were put together with a team of people. None of us knew each other. 5 of us from New England. We had a coach, and we had like 7 months to get ready to do this thing. And I was so singularly focused on my fitness, I ate better, I slept better, I was exercising. I was like, I don't want to fail. I want to get to the top. I want to get to the top. I want that picture at the summit. And you get so singularly focused. And that's me. I'm a goal-oriented guy, right? I'm a guy that just like, get to the top, get to the top, get to the top. And I'm not proud of that because that's dumb. You miss the whole journey. But that's who I am. And so my challenge to myself was not just to get to the top, but how do I appreciate the journey? And so I bought a really good camera, and I said, I'm going to stop and smell roses. I'm going to stop and take pictures, and that'll be my way of chronicling things, because that's what I do, but also like truly trying to appreciate the beauty of the moments by capturing them with the camera. And so that was my goal. Like, how do I just become a better person? How do I have this experience, this adventure at this time in my life? That was the thought when I left.
Right. Yeah. Here's the thing about it. Like, as I was reading it, and I've only ever really seen you in a lighthearted and joking and fun manner. Like that's been every time I've ever seen you, we've always laughed, it's a party.
You mean hiding behind a wall of laughter?
Yeah. Hey,
wait a minute.
Something very similar for all three of the people currently in this room.
A stand-up comic. Yeah, I'm damaged. I'm absolutely damaged. Of course.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can't be a stand-up comic unless you're broken.
Broken inside.
Broken, destroyed.
Absolutely destroyed. And honestly, out of most of the comics, I'm one of the few saner ones. So it's really, it's really right on the border.
Did you know that when you started the journey, did you know it was a book, or were you just focused on it exploring yourself?
Yeah. So I had this sense that there was this big thing happening. So I took notes and I took pictures, and I kept a journal. So the funny thing is, like, I look at myself as like, I write the show Ghost Adventures. I do a lot of stand-up programs and stuff like that. And wow, that's the payoff one. The one we were going to show at the end, that's the crescendo right there. Well, nice, Jason.
In my defense, you didn't label these.
I numbered them.
Oh, whoops. I didn't even notice.
Well, actually, Jeff, as a comic, always open strong. First one should be the big one.
You're right.
And the closer should be the second strongest. So Jason, go through that's the first one. That's keeping everybody in.
Good night. Guys. Thank you so much. That was the close. Good to be here.
Listen, open strong.
Oh, look at that.
Is that better?
So when we get to Africa, that was taken I took that from the roof of our hotel in Moshi. And that's the first time I saw it in person. And it does it no justice, right? Like that takes up the whole horizon. Technically, where I'm standing is still Kilimanjaro. That's still the mountain. I mean, it's the largest freestanding mountain in the world. It's a volcano, and it's not extinct. It's dormant. So, I mean, if that thing goes off, we're done.
What did your wife think about all of this?
Well, so she's been super supportive of everything, right? Like, I used to have a really good job in tech that used to send me all over the world, and I would like sneak off and write about haunted places for my website. People are like, how do you afford to go to France and all over Canada and all this other stuff? I'm like, I can't. I'm on someone else's dime. I just have a little time, and I sneak off and I do these stories when I have free time. And so so she knows I've always, and so I had this good job, and I got a $5,000 book advance for my very first book. And I said, like, hey, look, how am I going to, I've always wanted to write a book. This was 2003. I'm like, how am I going to write a good book and still have this really demanding job? She's like, you hate that job, quit it. And I was like, for a $5,000 book advance, And by the way, just if you want to do the math, like it took me like 6-7 months to write it. So if you want to divide, that's food
180 days.
Yeah.
5,000. Not much per day. Not much.
That is far below minimum wage. And so we had saved. We always live below our means. We've always saved up. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll do that. And if our savings ever hits this, I'll go get another real job again. And so it never did. And so I've always sort of found a way. So when I said, look, I really want to do this, she's like, I know you have to do this, but just give me like a day to process this, and we'll talk about it like tomorrow. I'm like, cool. And I've known her long enough to know, like, okay, like just leave it alone for a day. Like if you don't know your spouse, like you're in trouble already, right? So the next day she's like, I know you have to do this. You should do this. You're going to do this. Just give me one more day. I'm like, you got it. We can wait another day. And then it was my 42nd birthday that I announced I'm going to do this, and I'm going to raise money for Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and I'm going to train, and I'm going to do this. And I told everyone I could think of. I'm like at the bank, like, hey, I'd like to make a deposit. And by the way, I'm climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, and the reason I'm telling you is because I don't want to come back and tell you I didn't do it. right? Like I was telling everyone because I didn't want to. I wanted to add fuel to the fire, pressure. Like
Right.
I don't want to come back and be like, oh, like
Has that ever bit you? Has that ever bit you in the butt? Because I'm the same way of like, I have other friends who keep everything close to their chest, and then later they go, I did this. I'm like you, where I'm like, hey, I'm going to do this. But, has it ever bit you where you didn't complete what you said you were going to do?
Yes. And Jason's going to start like laughing right now. So when you're in the paranormal, you get a call from a TV production company about every 2 weeks. Yeah. We're working on a show, right? And we think you'd be great for it. It's the same call every 2 weeks, different production company. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. And early on, you get excited. You think like, I'm going to have my own show and I'm going to be rich and famous. And you start telling people like, dude, we're going to film a sizzle reel. We're filming it with my phone, but we're filming it. Right. And you tell people, and then they're like, hey, whatever happened with that show? You were going to be a star, rich, famous, and all that. And you're like, yeah, that didn't go anywhere. And so you start to learn like, take the call, of course, because you never know, but shut up about it because odds are it's not going to go anywhere. If it goes somewhere, you can be like, hey, it's going to be on tomorrow night at 9:00. Great.
And sometimes in my case, you cancel after
control though. Because I'm an actor and you can't control. That's something you can't control. Like Kilimanjaro, you had to control unless you broke your leg or something. Television is. I used to do the same of like, booked it, and then you'd walk out and you go, I didn't book that? How did I not book that? That's insane.
Yeah, no, but that's life. And so you're right. This is way more in my control. And it's funny you say break your leg. I almost broke my arm 2 weeks before. I was at a place called Mount Monadnock, totally icy, and I had these micro spikes on my boots, which are pretty good, but they're not infallible. And at this one point, I just slipped, and all my weight came down on the thinnest part of my arm. And then I went down on the ice, and I stopped, and my leg hurts, and I broke my arm. I'm sure of it. I'm sure it's broken, and I'm not going now. And the skin burst open. I didn't cut it. It split like. And I still have a little bit of a scar, but I was holding. I'm in pain. My eyes are opening and closing, and I was like, I can't go. I can't believe this. And then like I hobbled down the mountain. It wasn't broken, thank God, and I was able to still go with this giant bruise on my leg. But it was such a powerful lesson that like, trust your gear, but don't be stupid. There's so many things you learn when you're pushing your physical limits, right? There's a saying in mountaineering, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad gear and poor planning, right? So it's true. Like they make incredible stuff now. And you get used to layering, you learn things like when you hike in really cold temperatures, you should start cold. Don't keep putting on layers till you're warm and start hiking. You're going to sweat. And sweat, you're going to lose too much water and you're going to dehydrate and it's cold. And so you want to be a little bit cold when you start. So once you start moving, you find this equilibrium. Just so many things you learn about this basic thing that just sounds so easy, right? Walking.
No, it sounds absolutely excruciating. I used to do a long bit about like, these guys are crazy.
Yeah.
Like the one dude he had to cut his own arm off. What's the guy's name?
Yeah.
I saw him speak at some fundraiser. He does his whole speech or whatever. And he made like $75,000 for the 1 hour to come in and explain the story of how he went hiking and had to cut his own arm off to survive. And I was like, I mean, he makes that much money, but you know what I didn't do was go hiking alone and not tell anybody where I was. That's a terrible decision decision. Yeah. And now you're being rewarded. I go, that's not the lesson to learn. That guy was not smart.
You're totally right. And so one of the things, even on small mountains that are well traveled by like plenty of hikers, people don't go alone. If you pop an ankle, right? Like you're going to die of starvation because you didn't have a partner that could just simply get help, which is no big deal. But like, yeah, you're right. That's not a good decision.
When I watched Free Solo, I was like just cringing.
Oh, I know.
Obviously he's the best athlete of the year, but you're like, yeah, you can slip. You can slip. It's just, what's the point of it all? Like, especially as a parent,
you're right.
I joke about now, I used to like jump out of airplanes. And once I had a kid, I was like, I once went to the premiere for The Interview, that crazy, and there was a terrorist threat against it, right? Remember that film? And I went to the premiere and they had a threat against it as a bomb. And my buddy was telling me as we were sitting in the theater, I was like, I have a kid. I got to get out of here. I can't be here. because I can't have my kid grow up and somebody goes, "What happened to your dad?" And they're like, "Oh, he blew up in a Seth Rogen film." Like that's not. So I'm like so super cautious. Did your wife at all be like? I mean, Kilimanjaro is a serious mountain, man.
And people die there.
People die. Yeah,
they do.
Pretty scary.
So aren't there signs commemorating where people die?
I think I put at least one in the book. Yeah, well,
exactly.
So like, people leave plaques for their fallen friends that died there. And
I mean, do people stay on the mountain? Some like what other mountains, Everest,
No.
stuff, people are just on it. They're like, that guy died and he's right over there.
That's Everest. Everest, you're not going to risk your life for a corpse.
No,
but Kilimanjaro, they would get you off.
They can get you off.
Yeah, it's not
good to know in case I ever go.
Yeah, it's not a technical climb, so we're not like hanging by ropes and rappelling. Like the way we took, you can walk the whole way up. Without like there was one part, the Barranca Wall, where we're doing some rocks, but even that there weren't ropes. You just had to just mind what you were doing.
Are you on oxygen?
There was oxygen there, but no one needed it in our group. But they had it just in case, and that was only near the end. When you're at the highest point at 10,000 feet, it's really not a big deal. Like if you're standing still, you kind of don't notice it. And we've been acclimating. Once you get to like 15,000 feet, it starts to get exponential. So, you stand still and you relax and it's not so bad, but just like a brisk walk 10 feet and you feel like you just ran a sprint. And by the time we were going for the summit, we left at midnight from 15,000 feet, and it's 3.1 miles to the summit, and it's going to take 8 hours, which is like less than half a mile an hour. If you have a treadmill at home, it probably doesn't go that slow. Yeah, but you have to go that slow because, I mean, at one point I dropped my glove and I bent over to pick it up and stood up, and I was like, I couldn't catch my breath. If you want to know what it's like, take a drinking straw, breathe through just that, and then sprint down your street and just try to get enough air through that straw. And it's so hard. Your body's just fighting for oxygen. And the higher you go, I mean, it was so cold. At like 3 a.m, it's sub-zero. It's the coldest I've ever been. And I've been in New England winters. I can take it. And I am frigid and I can't breathe. And I've got this balaclava, which covers, your mouth and nose. And that'll keep me warm, but then I can't get enough air through that fabric. So I have to lower it to get air and then bring it up to be warm, and just so slow. And it's like 18,000 feet. And you think like, there's no way I can do this, but it would kill me to go home and be like, I made it to about 18,000 feet. Like, how do I go home and tell my friends and family that? But then you also pass signs where people died from the altitude, and you go.
There were people who weren't able to go all the way, right?
Yeah. So in our group, we got medical checks twice a day. They check your oxygen level, your pulse. They ask you questions. They're looking in your eyes to make sure you're focused and stuff like that. And so, way back at like 13,000 feet, 2 people in our group of 12 were forced back for medical reasons. They just weren't coping. One guy told me that when he was laying in his tent, it was spinning around like when you have the bed spins when you're that drunk, and you have to put a foot on the ground. He's like, it was just like that. He's like, and I'm like, oh man, dude, my tent doesn't spin at all. So yeah, but you don't train.
You trained so hard for it that you were physically ready for it.
But you can't train for altitude.
It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, no. Yeah,
it's
like
just your lungs and how oxygen gets into your body.
Some people like are fine at altitude. Other people can't handle it at all, and you just can't train anything for that. It's just you don't know till you get there. So I was in great cardio shape, and I was fine doing the distance. But I'll tell you, man, by the time we got up to the rim of the volcano, it was as deep as you could breathe, just all the way out and all the way in. And you're dizzy, and I felt drunk, and not the good drunk, just like can't have motor skills, can't brain, but by the time the sun rose, this was the payoff, right? This was the moment. It was so dark at like 3 a.m, but when we got to the edge of the volcano and we saw that picture you saw before, that was the sunrise. That was just this transformative thing for me. Like that was the moment when that's about 18,800 feet at a place called Stella Point at the rim of the volcano. And the Maasai people of the Serengeti, the Chaga people, they have a word for the top of Kilimanjaro that means like the house of God, where God dwells, because only God is allowed up there and those God deems worthy. And in that moment, that sunrise, like the whole world had warmed up 10, 15 degrees with the sun. And I truly felt like this spiritual presence, this thing, God, the universe, spirit of the mountain, whatever word you want to use. And I felt Chris, my brother-in-law. I felt those things right there. And I had this moment. I was laughing. I was crying. Everything was, it was like a wet towel that you just wring everything out of it. And in that moment, I'm like, I'm making it to the top. There was 500 vertical feet more to go, another hour, another like 3/4 of a mile or half a mile. But in that moment, I'm like, this is done. I will be there. It's going to happen, guaranteed. And awesome. And we did. And we saw glaciers that people aren't going to see much longer. They're melting because of climate change. And then you finally get to the top. You see this sign, and it's there in the distance, and it gets closer and closer. And like, this is the trophy, right? This is the photo op. And you get there, and there it is, right? 19,341 feet. And then the real crazy thing is, once you get to this point right here, it sort of hit me that the summit is not the goal. That's halfway.
Right.
That's right. The halfway point.
That's right.
If you don't get down,
no,
it doesn't matter at all that you got to the top. And so, and then it occurred to me too, that's halfway home, right? Like, home is the goal. You got to get home. You got to get home and tell your family about this. You got to get home and bring the new person that you are with you. And I think about the word home, right? Because like we've killed the word love. We've ruined it. Love. I love buffalo wings. I love beer. I love like certain bands and songs, and I love my daughter and I love my wife. And like, how the hell can you put all those things with one word? But home is much, much bigger than love. Home represents this place that my family lives, that we built together. And I don't just mean like physically built it. I mean, like, you know, we've built this whole life. And home is a word much bigger than love. And it occurred to me at that moment, I'm like, I got to bring all this home. And that was the transformation. That was the thing, to be like, the goal was never, I mean, sure, I wanted to be here, but that, I guess it wasn't the goal. The goal was home.
That's beautiful. I love that. I totally agree. I think that's fantastic. That's such a great mindset of love versus home. I love that.
Yeah, it's and then what's cool is like, and then you realize like, every adventure starts at home, and it should end at home, right? Like that's, you got to bring it back. You got to bring that good stuff back. And so it was amazing. And so as I'm coming down, when I got to the top, it's like a line drawing, right? A picture that's just a line drawing. And it took weeks, months for the colors to fill in, right? For that experience to fully process. So when I got home, I just started writing everything. And I wrote that book in like 9 drafts, which I'm not proud of. It shouldn't take that long. You shouldn't write a book in 9 drafts, but it's hard. Like, I've always written other people's stories. That's easy. Like, if you told me your story, I'd be like, oh, this is important. This isn't. This is the meat here. This is good. I can be super objective with your story, but when it's yourself, it's hard to step outside. Like, I had this whole thing on, I went to REI and this guy had like no personality trying to sell me this backpack. That was in early drafts. And then you read it later. You're like, no one cares that I went to REI. Like, gone. It's all gone.
That's a great skill, because I think that's hard to edit your own stuff is super hard.
Of course, it's hard to be objective. And so, but when you write it down, you get to walk away from it for weeks and months and then come back and read it again and almost pretend it's a different person. And the other thing that's super hard about a memoir, this is my first memoir. I've never written a memoir.
Right.
Like, the only, like, real art is just honesty. That's all it is, right? Like, the reason that art resonates with anybody, a song, a poem, a book, a painting, a movie, anything, is because it rings true and honest. And so I didn't want to make myself into some hero. I didn't want to like make myself into some guru. Like, I'm a dad. I'm just a guy, right? Like, tons of people do Kilimanjaro. It's not just me, right? Like, I mean, people do it all the time. But this was my experience, and I wanted to just be naked and vulnerable. And I'll tell you, man, it's hard. Like, it just came out a week ago, and I'm looking at reviews every day. And because if you said you hated one of my other books, I'd be like, well, it wasn't your taste. Fine, whatever. You hate this, you hate me. That hurts, man.
Dude,
That hurts.
every time I tell a joke about a story in my life, I feel the exact same way. We're like, this is so personal. And I think you're right. And Jason and I talked about that. It's like, because we talked about having people on the show who are real. And it's the honest stuff that's so visceral to all of us that we're all going through. And I think when you're honest, you really connect with people because they are like, that's how I feel. I mean, we all feel the same way. We're so divided as a country, and yet we're all in the same boat. It's nuts.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And so you realize, like, and it's hard to be that honest, right? Because, like, you know, we're all the hero of our own movie. And so how do you show yourself with your vulnerabilities and your shortcomings and all that other stuff? And by the way, if you can identify your own vulnerabilities and shortcomings, you actually grow as a person. Like, you get better, you get to improve, right? If you think you're perfect, there's nowhere to go from there. So it was such a learning and growing experience. So when I got home, I think even on the plane ride home, I'm like, this is a book. As a content guy, you know, there's stories that are best told as like a 3-minute selfie YouTube video. And there's stories that are a joke on a stage, and there's stories that are a documentary film, and there's stories that are books. And so, you know, and I was fortunate too that I found a publisher. I had 1,600 photographs, and I'm like, you got to show some of these, and we need color. So to get them to a full color hardcover book is expensive. And so I was pretty psyched that they agreed that, yep, no, we have to see all this in color, and that they sort of caught the vision of it. So now we'll see, because, like, man, it's a memoir, and we'll see what happens with sales, man. I have no idea, but I do know that to me, like, the mountain is this ultimate metaphor. You know, it's anything's a mountain, like trying to quit smoking, trying to get in shape, trying to finish that house project, take a class, whatever, you know, whatever it is can be a mountain. And there's mountains that end up in our path through no fault of our own. Loved one gets cancer, you get cancer, that's a mountain. But then there's mountains that we put in our path on purpose. And one of the best parts for me was to realize, this is probably like third or fourth day on the mountain, that you know, when we got up above the tree line, and there's really no animals anymore. There's nothing that is up there except some small shrubs. It's too hostile. And you realize, and then I saw like this little mouse scurry by, and I'm like, man, it takes grit to live up here. And then you realize, like, I'm up here right now. I have grit. I mean, I used to have it. I knew I had it when I was young, but, like, it's still there. Look at me with my grit, you know, because when you get in your 40s, you've designed a life that's comfortable, maybe too comfortable, right? You're like, you've got the job you want, the friends you want, the spouse you want. Yeah. Like, you live in the neighborhood. You've pushed away the people that annoy you. You keep the friends that are close, and it's so damn comfortable. You forget that the grit's still in there. And so it was kind of cool to be on there and be like, I still got the grit. When I need the grit, it's still here. Look at me in my 40s with grit. Ah, right? Cheers.
Cheers to that.
That's right.
It's interesting because, you know, like I said before, you know, I've known you only through this light-hearted, you know, joking way. And to read this and know you what I thought I knew of you, and to hear your internal monologue and you talking, and I think you talk about how this was not man versus nature. This was man versus yourself. I mean, this was you. And I really just, it spoke to me in so many ways, because number one, I was really rooting for you. I mean, obviously, spoiler alert, I know you lived because you're here right now. But I really was rooting for you. And, like, when you get to, you know, I don't want to give anything away, but, like, I really, like, every little thing that was happening, I was hooked. And I like I said, I don't get a lot of time to do, you know, recreational stuff. I just really needed to see this book through, because it resonated with me and where I'm at in my life. Because sometimes I do feel like it's too comfortable here. I do feel like there's too much comfort for me sometimes. You know, I love my family, and I wouldn't trade any of what I have for anything. But I question, am I currently living at my full potential? And I feel like your book in so many ways speaks to that. And I think that anybody, man or woman, dad or mom, who is in that kind of a place, I cannot recommend reading your book enough.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate it. And it was yeah, I mean it's just like this snapshot of where I'm at in my life in my 40s and this whatever this midlife thing is. And you know, I know some people their crisis is they buy like a Ferrari and have an affair with like a 20-year-old or something, you know, and like it's so cliche, right? It's so cliche.
It is cliche. Yeah,
Yeah,
terrible.
like do something bigger. You could do better than that.
I did the opposite. I just got married really late in life.
Right.
I didn't get married to late 40s and then have kids in my 50s. And so I got everything out of my system, but now I'm an old man trying to have kids. So they both are fraught with danger.
How old are your kids?
5 and 7.
Yikes. Yeah. So, yeah, no, it's the challenge at any age. And as a stand-up comic, so, I do tons of public speaking. I love it. It's my favorite thing in the world. And I try to keep it lighthearted, which is great.
I mean, you're very charismatic.
Well, thank you. But like, it's my favorite, like, you know, right. When the audience is with you and you're just like, there's nothing to do but surf. Like, I'm just riding this and you're like, oh, this is great. And then there's nights where it's just crickets and you're like, oh, I got to work extra. But I can always fall back on like serious content. Mm-hmm. My friend Mike Brody, stand-up comic from Minneapolis, he's done a few like paranormal conferences and he's like, hey, will you open for me? And by open, he's like, just warm the crowd. No comic wants to go up to a cold mic. Just how you doing? How's everybody having a great time? And it's an incredible thing. Like there's actual like magic that happens between performer and audience. And the first one we did was at the Mount Washington Hotel. It's like 300 people. I'm like, how's everybody doing? Right? Like, I'm like, hey, so Ghost Hunters is here. We got these guys. All right. Hey, this is crazy, right? I told a couple jokes. They're laughing. I'm like, Mike Brody, ladies and gentlemen. And he killed him, slayed him, killed him dead. The very next year, we're at the same event, but now we're downstairs in the cave bar. Very quiet, very dark. And he's like, same thing. Can you go up there and just warm them up for me? I'm like, I got you, Mike. No problem. And I go up there and I'm like, how's everybody doing? And I'm like, damn, it's cold up here. Hey, it's going to be such a fun weekend. And, and people are just like, ugh. Mike Brody, ladies and gentlemen. And Mike goes up there and he died. And he's really a great comic. He's super funny. I've seen him kill like more than once and I know he's good. And as soon as it's over, I just pulled him aside and I'm like, that was crazy. That wasn't you. It was them. Like, that's the audience's fault. And he's just like, yeah, we've all been there.
It is, but you have this crazy mentality after you do it long enough. Like, I've done shows in bowling alleys, laundromats, youth hostels where nobody spoke English. I just did some outdoor show at an RV park in Palm Springs over the weekend. That was a fantastic show. But you do it and you're like, I can get these people. You know, like you go on after a band, which is the worst thing ever. And you'll go, here we go, I can do it. And then you just eat it and you're like, you go home and you're like, I'll get it next time. But that's why we're sick people, man. We're sick.
I get it. So in the fall, like I do these story tours where I talk about legends and lore. And now, I mean, now I'm doing Kilimanjaro stories. I'm doing them over Zoom, but I'm doing them for like libraries and stuff. And it's hard because like there's this energetic thing that happens with a live audience that, man, there's nothing I love more. It's my favorite thing because like, yeah, when you got it, when you're in the room and they're with you and you're like, oh yeah. I mean, it's
the drug of choice. It's absolutely the drug of choice.
Totally a drug. And it's so great when it works. And I think too, like one of the other things I started doing, I haven't really told anyone this, they do these story nights around Boston where, you know, like the Moth and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It's like that, but it's not the Moth. It's just a different local version. And so, it's so fun to go there and just tell stories about your life. And you got 5 minutes and they ring a bell and you're done. And it doesn't matter who you are. And just to hear people tell stories, I feel like this tradition of storytelling, which by the way, stand-up comedy, that's all it is storytelling. I mean, that's, yeah. I mean, it's a many 1,000-year-old tradition, you know?
Yeah. So,
but I feel like this tradition of like sharing stories is coming back. And it's so great because like, that's the glue, right? That's when suddenly it doesn't matter who you voted for. It doesn't matter like who your sports team is. It's just like this thing I can relate to. Like, you know, the time I got food poisoning and puked all over my boss, and the time I climbed this mountain, the time I broke up with someone or found the love of my life. And like, these are the things that, you know, just transcend the human experience. And so it's so important that we share those stories. And it's so awesome that we have venues to do it, even during these weird times. We can live stream, we can do podcasts, we can meet in parks, whatever it is.
But Jeff, also, you got to know that the problem is now everybody thinks they can tell a story. And so everybody's a comic now. Like once Twitter out, everyone's like, "Oh, I'm a comic," and you're like, "Yeah." And it's so funny because I can listen to your whole story, and I was like, "This dude's a storyteller." And then you said I do public speaking. I go, "Of course you do." Yes, of course you do. I would come see. Are you out of Boston? Where are you?
I'm just south of Boston, but like I go all over.
I grew up in New Hampshire, but I went to BU, and I'm from North Andover too. I did my album at Laugh Boston last year.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah.
I'm coming back, and I'm going to hit you up in September. I'm coming back. I'm doing the Rex in Manchester and a couple other places around there.
All right.
And I need you to do 10 minutes to open the room up for me.
I'll open for you. No, I got this. I'll be like, who wants to hear some ghost stories? Yeah,
please, everybody does. I hosted Haunted Live. That's how I kind of came into this world with Jason and stuff. And I wasn't from that world, but I was a host, and so I ended up hosting Haunted Live, and that's how I met Dave Schrader and some other people. And all of a sudden, I got brought into this world, and I was like, "Why? This world's awesome! This was so much. Everyone's so much fun, and the stories. I found the stories that everybody told was so magical, and the history was so great that I've really enjoyed kind of being open to this world lately."
No, it's and hysterical, by the way, like, because I know how so okay. The two hardest genres in the world to work in are comedy and horror, because what scares you may not scare me. What makes you laugh may not make me laugh. Right? So those are really hard fields to work in. And so, like, I've worked for Ghost Adventures for 12 years now. And like, I'm not saying there's a formula, but like, we put you into a scary place where bad things have happened, where people have been frightened. We put the music, it's in night vision. Like, we know how to create this tense moment. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is, Jason, like when you go to some of these ghost investigations, like where we bring groups in and stuff,
right?
There's way more laughs than scares.
Absolutely.
You'd never make it on TV, right? But like,
so when I hosted the very first episode, I guess they fired the other guy, and they literally flew me to Tennessee the next day with the Tennessee Wraith Chasers. And I'm standing in front of some Civil War mansion, like hosting this show, and I don't know the world at all. And the guy is explaining to me the paranormal stuff, and he goes, "Jamie, up in the nurseries, there's a lot of activity up there. It's pretty scary." And I go, "Trust me, dude, I got 2 kids. It's terrifying." Everyone breaks out into laughter. And during the commercial break, the producer came over. He's like, "Hey,
don't do that," which is so stupid because, dude, here's why, right? Like, okay, who's the king of horror, right? Hitchcock, right? Hitchcock. The woman's you've already know that the killer's behind the kitchen door, and the woman walks in the front door, shuts the door, and she's walking slowly toward the kitchen, and you're like, "Oh my God, she's gonna die the second she goes through that door." And it's getting the music, the strings, it's getting tense, and you're like, "Oh, she's gonna die any second." And then she's almost there, and the phone rings, bring, and you start laughing your ass off because you're like, "Oh my God!" And she picks up the phone, "Hello," and you relax, and the killer comes out and kills the woman. And it's like, it's not rocket science, right? But like a good story has to move through an emotional roller coaster. If like when I tell my ghost stories, like I have to make you laugh because I need to disarm you. Right. And then once you're disarmed, I can let some stuff sink in.
Yeah.
And once the stuff sinks in, I got to move you from there too, because we can't stay scary the whole time. No one can maintain that. Like if I keep picking your arm with a needle, eventually it won't hurt.
Yeah.
Right. You got to move. You got to move through like the emotions. That's what
I can tell you've worked in television for a while. It is that you have to. I couldn't agree more. It's all about tone, and it's about finding the right tone, and it's great, man.
Well, the other thing too, like if you're a ghost, like let's put ourselves in those shoes. Who do you want to hang out with? Where are you? Or like, who wants to hear some jokes? Right? Like, I'm going to the comedian. Like, I'll be over here.
See, and Jeff, you've been on investigations where I've been, and people get angry with me because I cut up and I do it, and to me, I feel like ghosts look at ghost hunters like I do when a Jehovah's Witness comes to the house. I hide until something entertaining happens, and if there's something entertaining, I'm more likely to react. And people get furious with me because I don't behave as a typical ghost hunter.
No, I get it. And I've had the same thing. Like people leave their audio recorders unattended, and I see the little red light, and I pick it up and I'll like plug my podcast. listen to the New England Legends podcast on iTunes, and I'll put it back.
By Subway.
Yeah, right.
I did a similar thing at Mansfield, a reformatory. I pulled up the Grim Grinning Ghost from the Haunted Mansion at Disney and played the entire song into somebody's recorder while it was in there, and then I just walked away. And then I never found out how it went for him. But they had like.
Do you guys get a lot of cynics who are just there to basically try to disprove you and break up the fun? It seems like sometimes people are just like, instead of just going along, like I loved what you said earlier. You were talking about this journey, and that when we say yes and kind of agree to go along with something, life's so much more enjoyable as opposed to being the guy who's like, what is this garbage? What are you doing? This is crazy. Instead of opening your mind and going, hey, I don't know what's right or wrong, but I'm going to go along for this journey because it's just way more fun.
We don't have a lot. I mean, so the events that we're talking about are often expensive. You have to fly to them, get a hotel, and buy a ticket. And most people don't invest that kind of money to go mock you.
Right.
It's not a good idea. I mean, I've heard it. Like I'll do like programs at local theaters and libraries and schools and stuff. And sometimes some cynic or skeptic will start like chewing, like, how can you say this or that? And the way to shut it down is to be like, look, let me say right now, you might be right. Maybe there are no ghosts. However, boy, there's an awful lot of people that have had strange experiences they can't explain. So let's just listen to the story. And if you want to think it's just a story, if that helps you sleep at night, you go right ahead. For other people, it's a lot more real than that. I've had experiences I can't explain with any other word other than ghost or spirit. The top of Kilimanjaro, I felt God. I felt my brother-in-law. Can I prove that to you? I can't. Right. You're going to have to take my word for it or think that I was lightheaded and oxygen deprived. I accept that. It was my personal human experience. But I also can't prove to you that love exists. And I can't prove to you that humor exists or pain or sorrow. I can't. Although you've probably experienced all of them.
Yeah. People sometimes, I feel that way about everybody nowadays where everyone thinks they're just absolutely right. And you're like, well, why do you care what the other person believes in? If that's what they believe in, then it's their journey. Why do you feel like you have to comment and go like, this is BS? And you're like, really? Just everybody should be agreeable to what everyone else feels like, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. What do they care?
Exactly. Because they got Twitter.
Because negative comments get more response than positive comments. That's what we're training people to be negative. It's
Jamie and you and I have talked about this where you are rewarded and we're teaching our children you're rewarded if you're negative towards somebody. And it's absolutely awful. And it's not the world I want my kids to grow up in. So like we have a very low key light policy here that like, and my kids are destructive. Yes, but they love like no other. And like, they're just, everything is a party here. And I want them to keep carrying that into the world when they start going out into the world until they eventually go to prison. That's what I want them to carry.
And to have empathy, even when you get to prison, just as long as you're empathetic towards others, that's really what's most important, I believe.
Yeah. Might save you.
Honestly, might keep the shiv out. Who knows?
Yeah. Jeff, what does your daughter think about all this? I mean, what does she think about? Because you brought her back a present from the mountain. I remember.
I did. Yeah. So she, what was cool is when you have a daughter, it's funny how it makes you become a feminist. Like. You're like, oh my God, the world's not fair to women. Like you didn't think about it till you have one growing up, and you're like, So one of the things that struck me too on the mountain, there was a moment where we were near the second to last day, and we were up where there's nothing. It's just all this broken shale and stuff like that. And I took pictures. It looked like if you could picture like 10,000 dinner plates shattered. It looked like that. And so I was taking pictures. And our guide Mark reached into the broken shale and he pulls out this jet black shiny rock, and it's obsidian, which is a volcanic glass. And he said it's a Kilimanjaro diamond. He's like, keep it, take it. And I was like, I'm going to give this to my daughter. And I was taking pictures of all the broken stuff. And I'm like, look, I don't know who would argue that Kilimanjaro is not beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful from a distance. It's beautiful up close. It's beautiful looking out from the top. It's beautiful every which way. And yet it's a 1,000,000-year-old volcano that has been scarred, pocked, broken, battered, bashed by every conceivable force on Earth, from, subterranean forces to, winds and erosion and everything else. And it's beautiful in spite of these billions and trillions of scars and pocks and flaws and so on. And so I brought that back. I brought the pictures back, and I'm like, this mountain is beautiful and battered and bashed and still stands tall. And that, I think, really is what beauty is, right? Yeah. Beauty is, I can stand in spite of all these imperfections. And so like, that was sort of like this lesson for my daughter to bring back. And so I think she sort of dug that. I mean, keep in mind, like, I've had this weird job her whole life. Yeah. So, you know, for her, it's normal. I know last summer I got to film for one of the Travel Channel shock docs. We were filming some couple of different episodes.
You did the Amityville one I just watched. I
did 3 of them. Amityville was one of them, but we filmed that at the Conjuring house in Rhode Island, the house where the movie The Conjuring is based on that. And that's one of my daughter's favorite horror movies, you know? And so when they asked me to do it, they're like, we're going to film at the Conjuring house, which is only like 35 minutes from where I live. And I said, hey, look, I got childcare issues. Can I bring my daughter? Totally a lie. I had no childcare issues at all, but I knew she wanted to go see it. And they're like, yeah, of course. I'm like, yeah, she'll sit at the kitchen table. It'll be cool. And I'm like, dude, you want to go to the Conjuring house? Like, that was like dad points, like out the roof.
Awesome,
like,
that's awesome.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And so I told her, I said, look, this is critical. We're going to be there for a few hours. We're filming. It's super boring. You know, you just sit in the chair and they ask questions and, you know, but I said, we're going to be there for a few hours. I said, it is critically important that you use the bathroom while we're there. I need you to promise me. And she's like, okay, all right, whatever. And we were there for like 4 hours. It was not really a hard thing to do. And when we left, she's like, what was up with the bathroom? I'm like, for the rest of your life, you can tell your friends I peed in the Conjuring house.
That's funny.
Man. Well, man, hey, thank you so much for coming by. Thank you for, you know, letting me experience your book. It was very moving, very inspiring. People are asking in the chat, where can they get the book?
Wherever you get books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, like wherever your favorite local bookstore is, go support them. You know, it's distributed by Penguin Random House, so you know it's pretty much everywhere. Thank you for asking. It's a story. Not only that, hey, I don't know if you want to put this on screen. If you email me, killy@jeffbelanger.com, I'll email you back the first chapter as a PDF. And there's a link directly to my publisher where you can buy the book at 10% off, free shipping, and it's autographed. That's it. That if you email that, it's all automated. You get the first chapter as a PDF, the link to buy it. And I 2 weeks ago, I went to the publisher's warehouse. I autographed 500 copies. So that there'll be a special code, and they'll mail you one of those autographed copies at 10% off and free shipping, which is better than like Amazon. Just saying, like that's a cheaper deal. And so, yeah, because in normal times you'd do book signings, you'd be in front of people, like I could sign your book or whatever. And so, yeah, so that's the times we live in. We're trying to be innovative.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much, Jeff. Anytime you have anything going on, come back and visit with us.
Thank you, guys. Good to be with you.
Yeah, honestly. And Jason, thanks for having me on the show as the co, because honestly, this was so inspirational. I'm going to read the book because after this hour, I'm like, I've got to do better. I've got to do more, man. I got 2 little girls. I've got to really step up and get some stuff done. So I appreciate it, Jeff. It was really inspirational listening to you, man. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Good night, Jeff. So what do you think, buddy?
Dude, I mean, he's a force of nature.
Isn't he? Yeah,
I wasn't familiar with his work before, but I'm blown away. I mean, he's fantastic. And just his outlook on life and everything, I so subscribe to exactly what he's talking about, and it's just the positivity and you know, the get up and go. I love that cat, man.
Yeah, he is honestly. I've met a lot of people through the paranormal, but Jeff is one of my absolute favorites. He's funny. He's down to earth. He's got the biggest heart, and he's just a lot of fun.
Great speaker. I am going back in the fall. I'm doing a few shows because I'm from New Hampshire, and so I'm going back to Boston and New Hampshire, and I'm doing a couple shows, and I'm totally going to hit him up and make him come out and hang a bit. Yeah, he's fantastic, dude. I love that cat.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Hey, I wanted to let everybody know we do now have DADPOCALYPSE Now shirts, which you can get wherever you just go to the Facebook or the Facebook.com or Instagram or YouTube or wherever it is, and get a hold of us, and we will make sure that if you want the shirts, you get the shirts. Do you have anything else to go out? Where can we find your stuff, Mr. Kaler?
Well, the Dadlands, I think this might be showing on the Dadlands as we speak.
Yeah.
I have Tacoma FD, a couple episodes coming out.
Oh, really?
Stand-up tours, you can always find me at Jamie Kaler. And I just did a movie with Shannon Doherty that's coming out.
Really?
American Housewife I just did. So yeah, some TV shows coming out and some stand-up. I'll be back on tour. Actually, I just started doing some live gigs again. So hopefully in the fall I'll be back out touring again. And we'll talk about, Jason and I are going to do a little show,
something coming.
Something brewing that we're talking about. So really, dude, it was a pleasure. And thank you for introducing me to Jeff and letting me be part of the show. It was really fun. Always fun.
Awesome. Come back next week.
Please.
All right. Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.